Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you, Joel, for the kind introduction. It's kind of ironic. I never thought that I'd be speaking in someone's grandmother's living room, but I guess you never know. So we're going to talk a little bit about risk today, and I had several weeks to kind of think about what's the presentation, what's the thesis behind the presentation, how am I going to speak to risk and connect it to my life and connect it to hopefully each and every one of your lives. So I want to start off a little bit about my background. I think in my bio I'm described as a serial entrepreneur. And I think a lot about the word serial and wonder if it's because I continue to do things over and over again, one after the other. Or is it serial because it's a one in a series building towards something better? Or maybe it's just because while some things, let me try to follow this along, while some things do well, these two aren't connected if you guys see that, so there may be a lag in my right hand. While some things do well, others fail. But I suppose that's the point. That's who I am, that's how I'm recognized, and that's what I'm recognized for. Not, as my friends know and as my colleagues know, for my long hair, my black sleeve, or my vest, which is in fact my outfit, as you guys can see. This gets worn over and over and over again. But because I continue to be an entrepreneur, time and time again, and that means taking risk, time and time again. And not just risk in starting a business, but each business, every day, every single decision, every task, every hire, every post, everything is ultimately a risk. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Changing your relationship to risk. Because risk is seen as a dirty word. Something to avoid, or at least to measure against its potential reward. But that's just not how I see things, not how I do them. Because when every decision is ultimately a risk, you stop seeing it as something to avoid, and you start seeing it as a necessity to business. And my current businesses, and pizza in particular, is a manifestation of that philosophy. How changing my relationship to risk changed my relationship to business. My friend Albert Einstein. He's a looker. I stumbled across an article in Forbes magazine. It was actually written in 2012. And I learned three very specific, we're going to focus on the two, things about Albert Einstein that I did not know before. Number one, he was an avid sailor. The second is that Albert Einstein did not know how to swim, right? And Einstein is widely regarded as probably one of the greatest creative lions. And I love that word, creative lion. In the history of science, Albert Einstein was also a very keen risk taker. In the late 1930s, the article goes on to talk about in the Hamptons, right, in New York, Long Island, Nassau, Long Island in particular, residents would often have to rescue Einstein and his dinghy when he would sail into troubled waters. Right, he was a little crazy. It was often said that Einstein would sail unsuspecting scientists directly into a storm, just for the hell of it. Now, this could explain, if you study Albert Einstein, his purported curiosity to psychedelics or his exuberant sex life, but that's besides the point. The third point is Albert Einstein also wore women's sandals. It is a true story. I looked it up. One of his best friends owned a department store in New York, and he would go there and he would shop and he would pick up women's sandals. But that's not the point. The point is there is a deep and meaningful connection between risk-taking and creativity. For starters, creativity is the act of making something from nothing. It requires making public those bets first placed by imagination. Now, this is not a job for the timid. Time wasted, reputation tarnished, money not that well spent are all byproducts of creative gone awry. And creativity often goes awry. This too is part of the process. Creatives fail, and the great ones fail often. So, how do we counteract that? The most brilliantly creative people are also the ones with the most output. And if you research this, you'll understand in study after study after study, it isn't that they have better creative ideas, it's simply that they have more new ideas to choose from. This means by working at an incredibly high volume, they are offsetting for a built-in, extremely high error rate. As an example, my friends Thomas Edison and Leonardo da Vinci. Thomas Edison owned 2,332 patents, right? Who knew that he was responsible for the stock ticker and the tattoo gun? Leonardo da Vinci was an astronomer, a painter, an engineer, an inventor, a poet, and a writer. What this tells me is that having a high quantity of ideas does not, in fact, reduce quality, right? It's my belief that quantity enhances quality. So, not only does creativity require output, but it requires a willingness to fail. A willingness to fail over and over and over again. The most successful people in the world attribute the willingness to fail and persevere as one of the greatest keys and success to achievement. Failure is absolutely essential for growth. It presents an incredible learning opportunity and a chance for you to improve. You guys have probably heard most recently, thanks to Silicon Valley and the tech movement, fail fast and fail often. This holds very true with creativity. Fail fast and fail often because you know, right, it's not just about the creative idea, it's about the number of creative ideas. It's about the output. Getting a bit more technical, we've drawn the correlation between risk-taking and creativity, but let's take a deeper look at how the brain works and the brain's responsibility in creativity. So creativity is the byproduct of your brain making more abstract, long-distance connections. Right? Most of the time when we think about a problem, we have a problem to solve, the database the brain searches for is incredibly narrow, which is interesting, right? And that's because the brain is avoiding getting swamped by data. So it, in fact, follows the path of least resistance. It wants to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible so that it can move on. Now, when creatives problem solve, their brain works very differently. Right? It looks for more obscure, right, abstract connections, subtle relationships, things like music and novel linkages. Essentially, it is searching in every corner of your brain to come up with a solution. And that is why it is so damn hard to teach people to be creative, because your brain does not like to work this hard. It just doesn't. Lazy brain. And it must be trained to think this way. So how can you teach your brain to think this way? Learn how to skydive. Now, you don't actually have to jump out of a plane, but the point here is that when the brain encounters, right, unfamiliar stimuli, something for the first time, especially in uncertain conditions like jumping out of a plane when we can't physically fly, something happens. The brain's rational intrinsic system is shunted aside in favor of the intuitive creative system. So in an effort to save one's own ass, your brain, right, your brain's pattern recognition system starts hunting through every possible database, right? It's now working the way a creative mind works, coming up with a solution and causing the mind to stretch its muscles. And it's my belief that when the mind stretches its muscles, it creates a mandatory condition for innovation. As an example, I'm sure this has happened to many of you in this room, but think of the last time that you struggled to solve a problem. You couldn't come up with the answer. You racked your brain and you spent hours and hours and hours trying to figure out, how am I going to crack this code? And then you went to sleep. And it may be the following morning, it may be a week later, right? It may be a month later, but one morning you wake up and you have your solution, right? You wake up with a resolution. What has happened is that when you go to sleep, your conscious, right, dims, and your subconscious heightens. And when your subconscious heightens, right, it's kicking into gear the intuitive creative system that we talked about earlier, right? And it's finding relationships in all of the data that you have collected this far. So essentially, when you're sleeping, you tend to be more creative. And I can tell you that in every business, and Ann Pizza is the fourth startup that I've been a part of, every single good, creative, innovative idea I've ever had, I've never been truly present for. It happens at 3 a.m., it happens at 5 a.m., it happens at 8 a.m. It happens when I'm not actively thinking or on my toes, right? It comes to me when I least expect it, and I wake up and I act on it. And it's a really pretty cool thing at play here. So now that we've connected risk-taking and creativity, and you understand a little bit about how your brain works and how you can teach your brain how to be more creative, it still begs the question, why take risk? To create, as you guys know, right, in Creative Mornings, to create is to be seen, and to be seen is absolutely terrifying. Nobody wants to be criticized. Nobody wants to fail. And so when you know the risks involved, why would you dive headfirst into the shallow end, right? You risk being judged, criticized, analyzed by others, and if you're like me, even probably worse, by yourself. When you consciously know the risks, why would you see it to the end? And the answer for me is quite simple, which is there's no alternative, right? I don't see risk as actual risk, right? I don't see it as something that's measured against its potential reward. I see it as a belief, right? Something that I have to do, because to not follow that belief would be a loss. It would be something that would eat at me time and time again, over and over again. And so there's no choice, right? I associate risk with belief, and I follow those beliefs. And pizza and jaywalk is a manifestation of that, right? To not do it, and I'll use and pizza as an example, to not do it would have been to fail. And when everyone around me said, Michael, you're crazy, right? I was living in New York City at the time. Why in God's name would you start a pizza company? You know, I came from media and advertising technology. Why get into the restaurant business, right? There's such a high failure rate. It's really tough. You're managing a lot of hourly labor. Like, that doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. But to me, it did, because I believed inside that And Pizza needed to be given birth. It needed to be given life. I needed to execute on this vision, because to not do so would have been to be a loss. And the same thing goes for Jaywalk. For those of you that don't know, Jaywalk is a creative services agency based in New York City. It's my part-time job. But it also feeds my creative soul, and it bolsters And Pizza's output. So when you saw earlier the slides talking about, Thomas Edison, Leonardo da Vinci, there was a correlation to output, right? Where quantity actually helps the quality. And that for me is very true, right? The more work I produce here helps the quality of the work I produce there, and vice versa. So let's talk a little bit about And Pizza. This is one of my favorite photos. It's actually a chair that the pizza box is on. But And Pizza was riddled with risk. A tremendous amount of risk. It probably should not have worked. When I think about what we were up against, right, in no particular order, these were the sort of 50,000-foot view issues that we had, right? We were fighting a city we didn't know, an ill-advised neighborhood, an unfamiliar industry, right, having no experience, the weight of the uncool, I'll get into that in a little bit, and what it means to be a fast food restaurant chain. A city we didn't know. As I mentioned to you before, I came here from New York, and it takes a lot to not only act on an idea, but then to pick up your bags, move to a new city, and try to start, right, a consumer brand, a restaurant company, a restaurant in a market that you have no idea, right, what you're doing, where to go. You take the years and years and years of experience and this massive, robust network that you built, and you throw it in the wastebasket. That was what moving to DC was to me. But I saw something in Washington, D.C. that was very meaningful. I saw an incredibly strong sense of community. Right? I recognized that the market was not necessarily oversaturated, and it was open for something new, something innovative, something cool. And that wasn't because it wasn't already there. It was because it was bubbling up underneath the surface. I think you guys have seen what's happened to Washington, D.C. over the last 5 years. Right? The creative community here has infinitely expanded. Right? So many really cool consumer brands are being created. Right? The market is ripe and open for new and different and what we're calling cool. It also lacked a strong connection to pizza. It probably would have been harder to open up a pizza shop in New York, right? Since there's one on every single corner, and they're pretty darn good. So the second is an ill-advised neighborhood. So this is the first And Pizza, Birdland. It's on, for those of you, how many of you have been to an And Pizza before? That's pretty good. We have some work to do over here. You see that? there wasn't a single actually there was one person, and we'll get to that person later, but there wasn't a single group of people that thought opening up on 8th Street Northeast was a good idea. Our real estate brokers who we got introduced to, who have worked with Chipotle, and they've worked with Starbucks, and they've worked with all of the large chain concepts that have expanded throughout DC pretty rapidly, thought we were absolutely out of our minds, right? 8th Street Northeast, right? There's no day traffic. If you walk down there during the day, you recognize that there are very, very, very few people to be seen on the street. It's hard to get to. There's no metro that goes there unless you take the bus. Everyone thought we shouldn't do it. But when we first moved to DC, 8th Street Northeast is where we spent the lion's share of our time, right? It was the most comfortable, right? Meeting locals, right? In restaurants, in bars, on the street. It was something that we felt like we had to be a part of. We took a gamble on the neighborhood, and it paid off in a big way. 8th Street Northeast also had that necessary edge, right? When you build a brand in a neighborhood that is either ill-advised or isn't ready for it, but there was an edge there was a grittiness, right? There was a soul to that neighborhood that we have embraced. And as you see, for those of you that have followed our brand, we've embraced it, right? We've become more urban, we've become edgier, right? The things that I think really differentiate us as a business can be attributed to starting off on 8th Street. The next is an unfamiliar industry. Hey Siri. And this is what I'm going to call the inexperience advantage. We weren't chefs. We weren't front of the house managers. We weren't restaurateurs. But we believed in it. I think sometimes naivete creates the perfect platform for innovation. Not knowing what you're doing, not having a playbook on how to do it, all create the perfect platform to innovate. When you walk into a restaurant, if you spent years and years and years inside of a restaurant, you pretty much know what you're doing, right? There's a back of house, there's a front of house, right? There are positions, and you've been trained on those positions. And I think for us, doing something for the first time was incredibly powerful because we had no preconceived notions of what we were supposed to do. Now, it made it infinitely harder when we opened up our doors and we got flooded, right? And we could barely service those guests coming in because we were inexperienced. But that inexperience led to us blowing up everything and starting from scratch, right? If we were to create a restaurant, what would that restaurant look like? What would we serve? How would we price it? What would that experience be? And we thought like a guest. We were absolutely obsessed with our customers. Every decision we made wasn't as a restaurateur thinking about how much money can I make, right? It was thinking about what it's like to be a customer, a consumer, a guest of your own brand, right? When I go out to eat, what are the things that I enjoy? What are the things that I don't enjoy? For those of you that have been to an And Pizza, you know our pricing model is distinct, right? It's unlimited toppings except for shrimp. Because you all love shrimp in DC. It's unlimited toppings because we hated going to a restaurant and not knowing what the price of your meal was going to be. Because that costs 50 cents and that's $1.50 and that's 75 cents. I remember I built a salad one time. I won't tell you where. And that salad cost me $18. Right? That drove me insane. And I was like, you know how awkward that experience must be with the person at the register who's charging someone for an $18 salad that's making $10.50 an hour? So And that's not to say that that business model is wrong, but it wasn't right for us. And as a result of that, right, we priced our neighbors in as opposed to pricing them out. And our neighbors really appreciated the thought behind the business model. And time again, we were thanked by folks that had lived in the H Street community for 20, 30 years and said, thank you. Right? You're the first restaurant that's come here and been sensitive to the folks that have lived here. Like, we can come and support you because the value proposition is there. It makes sense. Now, what I can also tell you is that we had extraordinarily high food costs. Right? When people were looking at the economics of our business, they weren't very attractive when we had one restaurant. Right? In the restaurant industry, you generally want to keep your food costs to around 30%. And what that means is that you buy a pizza for $10, right? It should only cost me $3 in product to make that pizza. Well, on H Street, it was costing us $4 and $5. It was not sustainable, but we believed that over time, it would work itself out. And you could say that we were dumb enough, but I think we were passionate enough to believe that people will eventually, right, support us through high volumes of selling pizza, that we will make the business model work. And then when we got to our 4th and our 5th and our 6th, and the tipping point was when really we got to our 9th restaurant, where our food costs came down, and now they're about 32%, depending on the month. A ton of risk in that, but it paid off. The next thing, an American institution. Pizza, right? Dominated by Little Caesars, Papa John's, Pizza Hut, Domino's, right? Businesses that this day and age look more like FedEx, right? Getting something from point A to point B than a real restaurant company that's focused on product and experience. Right? We were fighting that, and not only were we fighting it, but we were trying to rebrand pizza. We were bold enough to put pizza right smack in the middle of our name, and then just throw an ampersand on it. So we rebranded pizza as And Pizza. And we did it because we were purpose-driven. We were values-based. We weren't profit-driven. Right? We didn't get into this business to see how many restaurants we could open or how much money we could make. We got into this business because we believed in what we were doing, in creating a brand that had a distinct culture that stood for something, a brand that was product-led. You know, whether you like our pizza or not, we work really hard to put out a great product at an affordable price. We also are working really hard at diversifying, right, through brand partnerships and through culinary innovation, figuring out what's the pizza shop of the 21st century going to look like. Because I can tell you right now that if we continue to do what we're doing and we don't improve, someone else is going to come along and they're going to literally eat our lunch. And so we are constantly innovating. And the last part is it was for the people. We built a brand that was for our guests and for our tribe. We thought about them incessantly. How do we not only take care of our guests, but how do we take care of our people? And so And Pizza truly is a brand that's reflective of the communities that we serve. The way to the uncool. Pizza isn't that cool, right? It may be delicious. You may eat it when you're drunk. Thank you for that, by the way, for supporting us when you're drunk. There's a nostalgia that comes along with it. Everyone can remember, right, a great pizza experience where you're probably drinking way too much Coca-Cola and eating way too much cheese. But it's not necessarily cool, right? Chuck E. Cheese is not cool, at least not to me. But So how did we take that and pivot and create something that was cooler and that was hipper and that was more reflective of 2012 and now 2016? We led with design. We created a brand that was focused on counterculture movement, that was focused on a lifestyle, that wasn't just about pizza, but an attitude, right? A go anywhere, do everything attitude, where this brand was for the people, it was by the people. And as a result, we've had success. We've been able to attract folks like yourselves, cultural influencers, people that have literally taken the brand on their back and marched forward and spread the And Pizza gospel far and wide. We haven't really had to advertise. We haven't really had to market. All we've had to do is take care of those folks that walk into our pizza shop, take care of those folks that come and work their tails off every day, right, to be a part of this brand. And it's really, really been a cool and inspiring thing. You can see right here, this is a tattoo. So one of the things that we offer anyone who comes to work at And Pizza the ability to get, to sign their allegiance to our brand in real ink. Now, I don't feel bad about it if the employment doesn't work out, because it's an ampersand. And that ampersand can be highly personal. It doesn't necessarily have to be our ampersand. If it means something to you, then it's going to live well beyond the And Pizza reference. And to date, we've had over 50 of our tribe members get the ampersand tattooed on them. Now, I wanted to have an actual tattoo artist here. But that apparently wasn't kosher. A fast food restaurant chain. So, sorry, there we go. When I talk about this being a risk, it's because when we were launching, what essentially is a fast food pizza shop, we were doing so when the health consciousness movement was the most powerful that it ever had been, right? When brands like McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's were seeing quarter after quarter poor results. When it wasn't cool, when it wasn't relevant to go focus on fast food and quote-unquote non-healthy fast food, we did it. And we did it through 3 key pillars. The first is through hyper-local shop design, right? Designing restaurants that actually reflect the communities that we serve. We did it by developing a strong brand culture, right? Standing for something, right? Allowing our guests and our tribe members to look under the hood and see what we're about, what we stand for, why we're doing this. And so it's not so much about the pizza, it's about the purpose, it's about the passion. And we remained company owned and operated. When we were putting this presentation together, Sam, who's sitting on this chair here in support, he said, Michael, you realize that we have received nearly 500 requests to franchise this concept. I almost fell out of my chair. But had we said yes to even 10% of those inquiries, right, And Pizza would probably be 10 to 20 times larger. Our bank account would be significantly healthier. But we said no. And we said no because it's not why we got into this business. I did not want to create something and then give it to you to go run. That wasn't what we stood for. And so we turned down cash in order to do things our own way because we couldn't risk, right, living with ourselves, being obsessed with our guests, knowing that someone else is going to run our restaurant. It wasn't for us. And so we have become more of an anti-chain chain. And we will continue to become more of an anti-chain chain. And just as an example, there are 3 restaurants depicted here. This restaurant is in Gaithersburg. Restaurant down here is in Brookland, and this restaurant here is K Street. And yes, you can see that there is a thread that ties the restaurants together aesthetically, but each and every one is different. Right here we feature JFK in a Warhol-esque exhibit, and that is K Street. Since it's our closest location to the White House, the entire restaurant is designed to be white. Down here you have Brookland. We hired a photographer, a local photographer, as well as flew in a rock and roll photographer from Kansas City who took photos of residents. When guests come into our shop, they can see their friends, they can see their family. They understand that there is a connection between this community and this pizza shop, and they own it. And most recently, this is Columbia Heights, opened in March of 2016, right? We have an abstract pattern that says oneness. And for those of you that don't know, celebrate oneness is probably my favorite core value. We have 4 of them. And what celebrate oneness means is celebrate who you are, right? Come to Ann Pizza as yourself, in your own skin. Be comfortable to be, right, who you are as a person. And we will embrace that, and we will support that, and we will rally around you. And so we create group success by celebrating the individual. I also think the store is designed pretty cool. And here at each of the bathrooms, Kelly Tolles, who's a local artist who all of you probably know, created in one bathroom 2 men's hands grasping, and in the other bathroom 2 women's hands grasping. But this idea that we are diverse and that we are inclusive and that we celebrate every single guest that walks through our doors. The results. I think it's important to talk about, and it's going to sound a little bit like we're bragging, and that's not the point, but the point is that when you take risk, right, and you do something for yourself and you do something for the right reason, it can pay off in a big way, right? It can also fail, but it can pay off in a big way. And as you can see here, financially, our core metrics meet or exceed the most successful fast casual restaurants in America. Right? Significantly outperforming Chipotle, and this was pre all the bad press they've gotten. I'll leave it at that. And right on the heels of Shake Shack, right? A really cool consumer brand that's gotten a ton of notoriety, most recently over the past couple years. Our brand has also extended beyond pizza, beyond business, and it has become a lifestyle. Our product line is bold, it's recognizable, and it's diverse. Right? Our vision is to lead with pizza, but use that as a platform to create a wide variety of product lines, whether servicing our tribe and university, or a product line for each and every one of you. We work hard at product innovation. We work hard to produce things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to taste or you wouldn't be able to get elsewhere. People always ask me, why did you get in the craft soda business? Well, number one, I couldn't support in good faith Coke or Pepsi. But secondly, because our soda represents our version of what soda should taste like and what flavors we believe pair well with our pizza. And so to us, 4.5 years ago when we got in the craft soda business and we spent hours and hours and hours mixing different flavors together to come up with the core offering that we have today, it was because we needed to do it, right? The ampersand to us represents our version of the truth, our version of what that product should be. Growth. So this is a map that we use when we're raising capital. and you guys all get to see it. But this represents not, oh, we can be so big, but this represents an opportunity, right? If we continue to march to the beat of our own drum, if we continue to make smart decisions, if we continue to invest in our people, if we continue to be true to ourselves, right, we can do what we want to do. And it may take 10 or 20 years later than a heavily franchised concept, but it's going to be ours. We're going to own it, we're going to control it, and we're going to be able to do things very differently. And I think the future is all about thinking differently. I think product innovation, brand innovation, I think we are the tip of the iceberg as this creative community starts to reach farther and wider into every industry and every vertical, right? Breaking down barriers, you will see change, massive change. And we want to be on the forefront of that. Some awards that we recently won, 7 awards. Washington City Paper 2016 Best of DC. When you pay, gluten-friendly, kid-friendly, late-night, vegan, vegetarian, downtown lunch, and fast casual, right? That's a lot. And again, we're not sitting here singing our praises, but saying risks are paying off, right? The hard work that everybody puts in that you all might not see is because we are working towards the future, not just working on today. And most recently, we were a feature on the cover of the largest industry trade publication, QSR Magazine. QSR Magazine did a feature on Washington, D.C., right? For the same reasons we had talked about earlier, what makes this town so special, right? When you see places like Sweetgreen and Kava and Taylor and really cool, right? Fast Casual 2.0, right? The next Chipotle's. People are taking notice. And they thought that what And Pizza was doing was different. Right? They were infatuated by our brand culture, by our thought leadership, by the way that we approached this particular business in this industry. So, the moral of the story here is believe in something and stand by it. Because when you do that, it's not a risk. It is a necessity for self-fulfillment. And those are powerful words. It's a necessity for self-fulfillment. The question is not, is this risk worth it? Right? The question is, do you believe in this decision? Is there something inside of you that is telling you to not do this would be a loss? To not take that risk, to not make that decision, to not move forward, whether it's quitting your day job, right? Whether it's doing something for the first time, right? Whether it's composing that song, whether it's writing that novel, right? Whatever it is that's inside of you, right? Do you care that much about it? Do you believe in it that much that it's worth giving up everything for it? And if the answer is yes, then that decision has already been made. But to do so, and for any of this to be useful, you have to first know yourself. You have to study yourself, spend time with yourself. When people ask me, and I get asked often by college students and sometimes high school students, about being an entrepreneur. And my first question to them is, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Right? Is it because you think it's cool? Because Silicon Valley and tech has made being an entrepreneur cool? Or is it because you believe in something? Right? Do you have a vision? Do you have a truth? Are you trying to express something that you don't see out there in the marketplace? Or do you just want to be successful, right? And stand on your own 2 feet and puff your chest? If the latter is true, I would strongly urge you to reconsider. If the former is true, then go for it, right? If you are one of those people who knows that not making a decision today is going to eat at you, then the decision is already made. You need to go make it. So the moral of the story is learn yourself, make your decision, and go do it. Because anything else is not a risk. It's a loss. Thank you.